To the families of the victims, to Indonesia as well, its deepest solidarity and its most sincere condolences. We would like to express also our gratitude to the UN and to the peacekeeping soldiers working alongside them. We wish a swift recovery to injured personnel, and we commend the courage, professionalism and commitment of all UN personnel in South Lebanon and around the world. France reaffirms its support for the UNIFIL mandate, which it must be allowed to carry out in full without hindrance until the end that is set forth in Resolution 2790. Grave incidents have also been committed by Israel against the French contingent in Nakura, and particularly against the head of the military of the force. Israeli soldiers have shown an aggressive attitude, carried out intimidation, and attacked the security of personnel of the French contingent at a time when deconfliction procedures had been duly respected. France condemns in strongest terms these direct threats to personnel working within UNIFIL. We share this information with the Israeli authorities, and light should be shed on what happened without delay. This council cannot settle for condemning, it must act so that these kind of acts do not happen again. The protection of blue helmets is an obligation under international law incumbent on all, and this was reminded to us by our briefers, and we expect that Israel provide concrete and immediate guarantees. Deconflicting procedures exist and must be respected by all parties without exception. Every day, UNIFIL blue helmets face risks of shooting, mines, IEDs, while they are working to implement the mandate bestowed upon them. These acts are unacceptable and unjustifiable. France appeals once again to Israel and Hezbollah to respect the safety of blue helmets. Anyone who puts UN staff at risk should be accountable before this council and the entire international community. President, these deaths cannot be looked at separately from the intensification of the war in Lebanon. Civilians are paying an unbearable price. In Lebanon, more than 1,200 people have been killed and 3,500 injured in less than a month, including children, healthcare workers and journalists. A quarter of Lebanese people are displaced in very difficult conditions, despite the goodwill and the proactive nature of the Lebanese authorities, with the resolute support of the international community, including France. In Israel, their population are forced to seek refuge several times a day in shelters, sometimes in less than 15 seconds. The path out of war is a well-known one. It's the full implementation of Resolution 1701 and the return to the ceasefire from November 2024 with the support of the US-French surveillance mechanism stemming from it. This, on the one hand, requires that Israel renounce any large-scale land intervention and also all occupation of Lebanese territory, which would only put the prospect of lasting peace further away. This requires, on the other side, that Hezbollah puts an end to these attacks and hands over its weapons to the Lebanese state in line with the decision bravely taken by the Lebanese government on the 2nd of March. Hezbollah must stop taking the Lebanese people hostage to benefit a war waged by Iran against Israel, a war that we condemn in absolute terms. Iran must also follow the decisions sovereignly taken by the Lebanese authorities, including that to demand the departure of the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon from the 29th of March. A diplomatic solution is possible to move towards peace. France is working on it, and we will continue our discussions with the Lebanese authorities and Israeli authorities to achieve a de-escalation that could open the way for direct negotiations. In this context, we welcome and support the brave decisions taken by the Lebanese executive to strengthen the sovereignty of Lebanon and its openness to engage in direct discussions with Israel. This is a historic opportunity that France would invite them to take without delay to achieve a lasting solution to this conflict in the interest of all parties. France is ready to facilitate these discussions in close collaboration with its partners. It's with this in mind that the French Minister of Foreign Affairs a few days ago went to Beirut and Jerusalem. But to achieve this solution, there are several conditions: the respect for the UN, the respect for UNIFIL staff and personnel, the respect for international law, including international humanitarian law and civilian people, and also the cessation of hostilities as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of France for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also wish to thank USG LaCroix, USG Fletcher, and ASG Khiari for their briefings. Colleagues, we gather today at a moment of profound sorrow and grave concern as the ongoing conflagration in Lebanon has not spared UNIFIL's blue helmets. Fully echoing the Secretary General's latest statement, Greece strongly condemns the recent killing of 3 Indonesian UNIFIL peacekeepers amidst heavy firing. We express our condolences to the families of the fallen peacekeepers and to our Indonesian colleagues. The incident is tragically added to a series of violent attacks against UN personnel, including the injuring of Ghanaian blue helmets earlier this month and a Polish one a couple of days ago. Attacks against UN personnel are unacceptable. They constitute grave violations of international humanitarian law and of UN Security Council Resolution 1701 and must immediately stop. The safety and security of peacekeepers is non-negotiable. We call for a thorough investigation and accountability for this incident. Mr. President, Lebanon continues to pay the price of a conflict it neither chose nor can afford. We strongly condemn once again Hezbollah's attacks in support of the Iranian regime against Israel, which triggered a dangerous round of regional escalation. These attacks severely undermine the Lebanese government's efforts to restore its exclusive control over arms across the country. Restoring the state monopoly over arms throughout the country is an essential prerequisite for sustainable peace and security for Lebanon, Israel, and the region. In this regard, we commend the historic and courageous decision of the Lebanese Council of Ministers to ban Hezbollah's military activities. This is a step in the right direction, demonstrating the Lebanese government's willingness to deal with outstanding issues and deserves the full support of the international community. Lebanon should not stand alone. Greece fully supports the efforts of President Aoun and of the Lebanese government to forge strong state institutions. Empowering the LAF is essential for ensuring Lebanese sovereignty. Greece already bilaterally assists Lebanon, including the LAF, and we stand ready to participate in the international conference in Paris as soon as conditions allow. We also recognize Israel's right to self-defense. Communities in northern Israel have suffered terribly due to Hezbollah's attacks since October 2023. However, any further escalation must be avoided. We call for a maximum restraint, and we are opposed to protracted ground operations. The expansion of Israel's military operations into Beirut and across Lebanon's territory aggravates the already fragile security situation. Greece reaffirms its support for the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and political independence of Lebanon. Full respect for Resolution 1701 and the November 2024 ceasefire agreement is essential in this regard. Mr. President, civilians are bearing the heaviest burden of this crisis. More than 1 million people have been displaced, many lives have perished, and thousands have been severely injured. The risk of broader regional destabilization, including of additional refugee flows, is growing. Civilian infrastructure, including airports, ports, and bridges across the country, do not constitute legitimate targets. Journalists, humanitarian and health care workers must be protected at all times and in all circumstances. We also express our condolences to the families of the victims and our solidarity to those impacted by this war. International humanitarian law must be upheld by all parties, everywhere and at all times. Standing in full solidarity with the Lebanese people, Greece immediately responded to OCHA's flash appeal, allocating a substantial financial contribution. We are also finalizing our contribution to strengthening Lebanon's health sector. At the same time, the tireless efforts of humanitarian actors on the ground, including UN agencies in UNRWA, cannot be overlooked. Their work under extremely difficult and dangerous conditions is indispensable as it is commendable. Mr. President, any further escalation risks the lives of civilians who have not opted for this conflict. It endangers UN personnel who are striving to uphold peace at the risk of their own safety. And it severely undermines Lebanon's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence, which we strive to preserve. We commend the willingness of the Lebanese leadership to pursue direct political negotiations with Israel. This is a moment for responsibility and de-escalation. Lebanon deserves a future of peace, security, and dignity, free from external interference and internal division. Greece will stand by its side in that effort. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of Latvia.
Mr. President, allow me to begin by thanking you for convening this meeting on such a short notice, and I also thank France and Indonesia for requesting this meeting in light of UNIFIL casualties and the grave and escalatory situation in Lebanon. I thank USG LaCroix, USG Fletcher, and ASG Khiari for their briefings. Latvia strongly condemned the attacks on UNIFIL, resulting in the death of 3 Indonesian peacekeepers and injuries to several other peacekeepers. And we express our deepest condolences to the Republic of Indonesia. Our thoughts are with the injured and the loved ones of the deceased. We call for a robust and timely investigation to determine the perpetrators of the attacks. We call for the accountability of these blatant violations of international humanitarian law. The safety and security of UN personnel and property is not optional. It must be respected by all sides at all times. Deliberate attacks on peacekeepers are grave violations of international humanitarian law and may constitute war crimes. We call upon all members of this Council to continue stressing the crucial importance of upholding commitments agreed in Security Council Resolutions 2518 and 2730. We commend the exceptional service of UNIFIL as it continues to implement its mandate under Resolution 1701 and providing assistance to the local population even in the direst of circumstances. All essential personnel, including those from my own country, are still on duty in the midst of hostilities. The threats to safety and security of UNIFIL peacekeepers have clearly reached a threshold which demands further reflection by the UN and the mission's leadership on how to prevent further casualties while continuing to implement its mandate. The latest incidents demonstrate the current military escalation in Lebanon has serious consequences for all: the civilian populations, the humanitarian personnel, and for UN peacekeepers. Even clearly recognizable UN peacekeepers become targets when the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution are discarded. The ongoing conflict undermines the stability in the region and the global security. We express concern about the humanitarian crisis caused by mass displacement in Lebanon and inflow into Syria. Over 1 million people forcibly displaced, of which 370,000 are children. 3,700 injured, over 1,200 deaths. Hezbollah has dragged the people of Lebanon into a war they have no part in. Iran must stop enabling Hezbollah's military activities and armed hostilities. Hezbollah must immediately stop all aggressive actions against Israel and disarm. The Lebanese government has clearly taken a stand against the malign influence of Hezbollah and Iran in their country. We commend the Lebanese government's decision of 2nd of March to declare all Hezbollah military and security activities illegal in the whole territory of Lebanon. We also welcome the political commitment of the Lebanese government to extend its authority throughout the country and the implementation of the disarmament plan. Continued international support in these efforts remains essential. We call upon Israel to abstain from attacks against civilian infrastructure and heavily populated areas, and to respect the Lebanese sovereignty and territorial integrity. All parties must respect international law, including international humanitarian law, and ensure the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure. Mr. President, the hostilities around the Blue Line continue to escalate, claiming the lives of civilians and UNIFIL peacekeepers with increasing frequency. International humanitarian law is being ignored. We call on all parties to the conflict to fully respect the Security Council Resolution 1701, de-escalate and work towards peace. For generations, the Lebanese people have suffered from armed conflict. Lebanon, yet again, finds itself on the brink. And we continue to start by Lebanon and its people. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Latvia for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank USG LaCroix, USG Fletcher, and ASG Khaled Khiari for the briefings that shed light on various dimensions of this situation. Pakistan condemns in the strongest possible terms the killing of 3 Indonesian peacekeepers serving under the United Nations interim force in Lebanon in separate attacks. This tragic and deeply disturbing incident strikes at the very heart of international law, UN peacekeeping, and the international community's collective commitment to the maintenance of international peace and security. But we know that these are not isolated incidents, but part of a disturbing pattern of attacks on UNIFIL. As USG LaCroix also noted, UNIFIL has been subjected to a persistent aggressive behavior and restrictions on freedom of oppression. The Council must not allow such violence against peacekeepers to become normalized. These missions are mandated by the Security Council, and their protection is the Council's foremost responsibility. As one of the largest troop contributing countries, Pakistan, having lost 182 peacekeepers in the line of duty, we share this profound sense of loss. We stand in full solidarity with the government and people of Indonesia, as well as with the families of the fallen peacekeepers, whose sacrifice reflects the immense risks undertaken in service of international peace and security. And we wish full and speedy recovery to the injured peacekeepers. President, attacks against peacekeepers are unacceptable and may constitute war crimes under international law. UN personnel are impartial agents of peace. Targeting them is a grave violation that undermines international humanitarian law. The failure to ensure the safety of UN personnel undermines the credibility of this Council of Peacekeeping, international law, and the collective commitment of the international community to maintain peace and protect civilians. In this regard, accountability is essential, and those responsible must be brought to justice. Pakistan calls for a prompt, thorough, transparent, and impartial investigation to establish the facts. The safety and security of peacekeepers and UN premises must be fully ensured at all times in full accordance with international law. Pakistan deeply appreciates the vital role of UNIFIL in carrying out its mandate in a complex and high-risk environment while maintaining peace and stability along the Blue Line. Full freedom of movement of its personnel must be guaranteed. Recent artillery shelling, airstrikes, and drone attacks have increased hostile incidents against UNIFIL peacekeepers in clear violation of international law. This incident must also be viewed within the broader context. Israel's continued military actions in southern Lebanon have resulted in the death of more than 600 civilians, displacement of more than 1 million people, and widespread destruction of civilian infrastructure. Ongoing fighting and hostilities are further exacerbating the humanitarian situation and heightening risks to both civilians and peacekeepers. These developments are undermining the Lebanese government's bold steps policy decisions, and serious commitment to peace and stability. We must not allow this. The Council must extend its full support to Lebanon. We urge all parties to adhere to their obligations under Security Council Resolution 1701 and the Cessation of Hostilities Agreement of November 2024. Full compliance with these commitments is essential to prevent further escalation and to restore stability in the region. In this context, we also call for full respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon. And Pakistan stands firmly with the government and people of Lebanon. President, in the light of the evolving and deeply concerning situation in the region, we stress that further escalation must be avoided at all costs. We call on all parties to exercise maximum restraint. The ultimate objective must be urgent de-escalation, restraint, and a complete cessation of all hostilities and a peaceful resolution of all issues to prevent further deterioration of the regional security environment. This Council, we believe, must fully espouse and advance that objective. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also thank Under-Secretary LaCroix, Under-Secretary Fletcher, and Assistant Secretary General Khiari for their informative and alarming briefings. We also thank France and Indonesia for calling this urgent meeting, which we agree is both necessary and timely. Recent days' events illustrate how fragile and dangerous the situation in Lebanon has become, and how crucial it is to prevent further escalation for the civilians of Lebanon and Israel alike. Mr. President, we condemn in the strongest possible terms the attacks on UNIFIL, which in the past 2 days have caused the deaths of 3 peacekeepers and the serious injuries of others. We look forward to the results of UNIFIL's full and thorough investigation into these incidents. Peacekeepers are clearly protected under international humanitarian law, and any deliberate targeting against peacekeepers is unacceptable. Denmark extends its deepest condolences to the families of those killed, as well as to the government and people of Indonesia. We wish a speedy recovery for those injured. The brave women and men of UNIFIL serve under the UN flag in the pursuit of peace. They are the embodiment of multilateral solidarity and cooperation in action, and these incidents represent a direct attack on these principles. We commend UNIFIL for its continuous work despite the extremely challenging circumstances and stress our unwavering support for the mission. Mr. President, as we've said before, we strongly condemn Hezbollah's continued attacks against Israel, which has dragged Lebanon into yet another unwanted war and must stop immediately. Denmark is concerned about the significant humanitarian and civilian consequences of Israel's military operations in Lebanon and underlines that all military actions must be conducted with full respect for international humanitarian law, including the principles of proportionality, distinction, and precaution. The protection of civilians must be ensured, and unimpeded passage of humanitarian relief must be facilitated. Recent statements by, for instance, the Israeli finance minister about the intention to move the Lebanese-Israeli border to the Litani River are deeply concerning. This area makes up 1/10 of Lebanon's territory, is home to hundreds of thousands of Lebanese, and includes cities with a rich and diverse cultural heritage. We strongly urge Israel to refrain from any large-scale ground invasion or long-term occupation of Lebanese territory that risk escalating the hostilities beyond control. This includes withdrawing its forces from occupied areas in Lebanon in line with the November 2024 cessation of hostilities agreement. Denmark calls for respect for Lebanon's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence in line with resolutions 1701 and 1559. Hezbollah must cease all attacks on Israel and respects the Lebanese state's exclusive authority over all arms and military activity. The Lebanese government has taken unprecedented steps in its efforts to disarm Hezbollah. We fully support the government's efforts in this regard. Mr. President, with reports of 1.1 million displaced in Lebanon, including over 350,000 children, and more than 1,200 killed, including many civilians, the humanitarian situation is quickly reaching unmanageable levels. The majority of the displaced lack formal shelter, protection, food, and medical services. Humanitarian access to the south is significantly restricted for an estimated 150,000 people. Denmark condemns all attacks directed at civilians and civilian infrastructure, including first responders and healthcare personnel. Since March 2nd, we've seen 87 attacks on healthcare in Lebanon, resulting in more than 50 deaths among healthcare personnel and many more wounded. This must stop. Denmark recalls resolutions 2286 and 2730 on the protection of medical staff and facilities and the protection of humanitarian workers. We urge all parties to fully respect their obligations under international humanitarian law, uphold these resolutions, and ensure that all civilians, including medical staff and humanitarian workers, are protected and do not become the targets of attacks. Denmark also expresses our deep concern over the reported attacks on journalists and recall that civilians must be protected under international humanitarian law. Mr. President, in closing, as the situation in the region continues to escalate and the path to stability cannot be selective, but must be comprehensive. We must not allow developments in Lebanon to be overshadowed by other events. We must collectively and strongly insist on de-escalation. Around this table, we must do all within our power to this urgent end. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3, namely the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Liberia, and my own country, Somalia. We thank USG LaCroix, USG Fletcher, and ASG Khiari for their comprehensive briefings. The A3 expresses its grave concern regarding the recent escalations of hostilities in southern Lebanon and joins the Secretary General in condemning the attacks against the United Nations interim force in Lebanon, which have resulted in the killing and injury of Indonesian peacekeepers. We extend our deepest condolences to the families of the victims, to Indonesia, and the troop contributing countries of the United Nations. We pay tribute to all peacekeepers who risk their lives in the service of international peace and security. Targeting United Nations peacekeepers is unacceptable and constitutes a serious violation of international law and relevant Security Council resolutions, including Resolution 1701. The safety and security of United Nations personnel and premises are not negotiable and must be respected at all times. Under no circumstances should peacekeepers be subject to any hostile acts, and those responsible for these attacks must be held accountable. Mr. President, the A3 is deeply concerned by the continued deterioration of the security situation along the Blue Line and the increasing toll on civilian populations, including civilian casualties, destruction of infrastructure, and large-scale displacement. We reiterate the urgent need to ensure the protection of civilians and full respect for international humanitarian law and international human rights law. The A3 reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity, and political unity of Lebanon. Lebanon must not become an arena for proxy confrontations or broader geopolitical tensions. Respect for the sovereignty of states and the principle of non-interference remain essential to preserving regional stability. Mr. President, the A3 calls on all parties to exercise maximum restraint and to refrain from actions that could further inflame tensions or destabilize the situation. We stress the importance of returning to the cessation of hostilities arrangements of 26 November of 2024 and ensuring that the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701 as the primary framework for maintaining stability and preventing renewed conflict. Dialogue and diplomacy remain the only viable path to preventing further deterioration of the situation. We acknowledge the critical role played by UNIFIL in supporting stability, facilitating dialogue, and contributing to de-escalation along the Blue Line. The mission remains an essential instrument for confidence building and conflict prevention. We reiterate our full support for UNIFIL and express appreciation to troop contributing countries for their continued commitment. We also emphasize the importance of continued support to the Lebanese state institutions, including the Lebanese armed forces, to enable them to effectively assume their responsibilities in maintaining security and stability throughout Lebanese territory. To conclude, Mr. President, the A3 stands in solidarity with the people of Lebanon and reiterates its support for all efforts aimed at preserving stability, preventing regional spillover, and achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East in accordance with international law and the Charter of the United Nations. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Somalia for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Panama thanks you for convening this informative meeting and also for the information shared by the briefers this morning. USG Jean-Pierre LaCroix, ASG Khaled Khiari, and USG Tom Fletcher in their informative briefings to the Council that show that the situation in Lebanon continues to deteriorate in an alarming manner. We recognise the presence of the representatives of Lebanon, Israel, Indonesia, and Poland, who grace us with their presence this morning. 20 days have gone by already since the last meeting of this Council, and far from seeing a de-escalation, the situation in Lebanese territory, including continuous bombings and fighting, has got significantly worse, with an increase in humanitarian consequences. Panama reiterates its condemnation of Hezbollah for the attacks and the irresponsible actions that have unleashed the current spiral of violence. In line with the most recent information from the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, since March 2nd, we have seen more than 3,900 incidents of hostilities, with at least 1,100 people killed, including tens of women and children, and more than 3,200 injured. More than 1 million people have been displaced, of which more than 136,000 are currently in collective shelters, while more than 189,000 have crossed to Syria. This shows the regional dimension of this crisis. Panama categorically rejects the attacks against the civilian population, as well as against civilian infrastructure, including health centres and medical personnel, and these continue to claim lives and to aggravate the suffering of the population. Mr. President, Panama condemns in the strongest terms the deaths of blue helmets from the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, following the attacks that occurred recently, including the explosion of a projectile on a UNIFIL position in the south of Lebanon, as well as the serious injuries suffered by members of the contingent that reflects the deterioration of the security conditions on the ground. Panama expresses its most sincere condolences to the families of the blue helmets who lost their lives, in particular to the Indonesia contingent, as well as to the state that they belong to, and we extend our full solidarity to UNIFIL personnel. This tragic incident is yet another on the list of recent incidents, including the one where 3 blue helmets from the Ghana contingent were injured. And this shows a concerning pattern of growing risks for peacekeeping personnel and constitute grave violations of international law, including international humanitarian law, of Resolution 1701, as well as of the fundamental norms that protect United Nations personnel and their inviolable character. It's essential for these occurrences to be investigated and for there to be accountability, so that impunity does not provide cover for actions like this one in the present and in the future. As UNIFIL itself has stated, nobody should lose their life serving the cause of peace. Panama reaffirms its full support to the work of UNIFIL, whose presence remains essential to reduce tensions, to support the deployment of the Lebanese army, and to preserve the stability across the blue line. Mr. President, Panama reiterates its firm support and its recognition of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, unity and political independence of the Lebanese state and of its government and institutions, in particular the Lebanese armed forces, to strengthen the authority of the state across the whole of its territory and to be able to advance towards the principle that the monopoly over the legitimate use of force and arms lies exclusively with the state, and this in line with Resolution 1701. We reiterate, in light of this grave situation, an appeal to all parties to return to the cessation of hostilities agreement of the 26th of November 2024 and to fully comply with their obligations under international law. We urge seizing this opportunity to return to dialogue and negotiations, those offered by the Lebanese government to Israel. There is no military solution to this crisis. The full implementation of Resolution 1701 remains the fundamental framework that will guarantee stability across the blue line and allow us to move towards a lasting solution. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of China.
President, I thank USG LaCroix, USG Fletcher, and ASD Khiari for their briefings. And thank you for convening this emergency meeting at the request of France and Indonesia. I welcome the representative of Lebanon at today's meeting. Tensions in the Middle East are escalating and the spillover effects continue to spread. The rise and runs of the conflict in the Middle East are crystal clear. The pressing priority is to actively promote talks for peace, seize the opportunity for peace, and bring the conflict to an end. Since the situation between Lebanon and Israel escalated, hostilities have continued to intensify, resulting in severe casualties and destruction of infrastructure. The international community must take urgent action to put the brakes on the conflict before it spirals further out of control and to restore peace and stability in the region at an early date. I wish to make 3 points. First, achieving a ceasefire and cessation of hostilities is the most pressing task. The ongoing exchanges of fire between Israel and Hezbollah have plunged the people of the region into the suffering wall. Israel's continuous escalation of military offensives has already killed over 1,200 people. The recent announcement by Israel to expand ground operations in Lebanon and extend the so-called buffer zone risks further prolonging and escalating the conflict, which is a cause for concern. Lebanon must not become another Gaza, and the international community must never allow the tragedy of Gaza to be repeated. China calls on the parties concerned to immediately cease hostilities and work to de-escalate the situation. Israel should immediately withdraw all its forces from Lebanon and respect Lebanon's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. Second, supporting Lebanon's domestic stability is of the utmost importance. The current situation has dealt a severe blow to the political, economic, and humanitarian situations in Lebanon. We welcome the efforts of the Lebanese government to strengthen governance over the country, and support parties in Lebanon in actively engaging in political dialogue to properly resolve differences. Under Israel's intense bombardment and large-scale forced evacuation orders, the humanitarian situation in Lebanon has rapidly deteriorated, with more than 1.2 million people forced to flee their homes and become displaced. The international community should step up emergency assistance to Lebanon and support the government in stabilizing domestic situation, ensuring basic livelihood, and alleviating humanitarian challenges. Third, the safety and security of UNIFIL is a bottom line that must not be challenged. Recently, UNIFIL's safety has been repeatedly affected by hostilities, including 2 deadly attacks that killed 3 peacekeepers and injuring many others. China strongly condemns the attacks against UNIFIL. We express deep condolences over the deaths of Indonesian peacekeepers who were killed in the attacks and heartfelt sympathies to the injured. Any deliberate attack on UN peacekeepers is a serious violation of international humanitarian law and Security Council Resolution 1701. Such attacks are absolutely unacceptable and must stop at once. We highly commend UNIFIL for remaining at their posts amid hostilities and urge the parties concerned to take concrete measures to ensure the safety and freedom of movement of UNIFIL, and to conduct serious investigations into and seek accountability for all attacks on peacekeepers. China respects the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Lebanon and stands ready to work with the international community to make unremitting efforts to help de-escalate tensions between Lebanon and Israel and restore peace and stability in Lebanon and the Middle East. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
President, we are grateful to USG Jean-Pierre LaCroix and Tom Fletcher, and also ASG Khaled Khiari for their comprehensive briefings on the situation in Lebanon, which are very concerning also. The nigh-on month of military escalation along the Blue Line and beyond is affecting not only our friends, the Lebanese people, but also peacekeepers of UNIFIL deployed in the south of the country. A clear and at the same time tragic confirmation of this is the death of 3 UNIFIL personnel in the last 48 hours and the injuring of several others. We express our sincere condolences to the families of the victims, and we wish a swift recovery to the injured peacekeepers. From what we can ascertain, according to comments from the leadership of the UN and UNIFIL, the investigation into what happened in the south of Lebanon is ongoing. We trust that the UN Secretariat will soon receive comprehensive information on this, including on who carried out this flagrant attack. Russia decisively condemns all attacks on UNIFIL troops, whoever the perpetrator was. We support the calls of the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres to parties to the conflict to comply with the norms of international law and guarantee the security of blue helmets. We strongly believe in the need for a swift ceasefire in the Lebanon-Israel border area. Otherwise, this heinous spike in violence in the south of Lebanon won't be the last fatal incident affecting UN staff. President, another dangerous trend in recent days has been the deliberate targeting by the IDF of the media, reporting on the ground in the area of the Lebanese-Israel clashes. According to information we've received on the 28th of March, as a result of a strike from an Israeli drone in the region of the Jezin, a famous journalist from the television channel Al Manar was killed, Ali Shuyaib, and also his colleagues from Al Mayadin channel, Fatima and Mohamed Fatouni. Earlier on the 19th of March in the south of Lebanon, as a result of a missile attack by the Israeli Air Force, a camera crew from Russia Today were injured. The targeted strike was carried out directly close to where they were filming, where there were no military objects, which is clearly confirmed because the camera operator was able to film the detonation of the ammunition. We see this kind of action by Israel and its military to be a grave violation of international law and a deliberate hindrance to the work of the media. We demand a painstaking investigation into this incident by the Israeli authorities and for the perpetrators to be held accountable and for this kind of incident not to be allowed to happen again. President, we, like the majority of the people in this room, are very concerned about the intensification of hostilities of Israel in Lebanon, including daily exchange of fire and the consequences of this for both parties to the conflict, the destruction of critical civilian infrastructure. For the time while we are discussing the incident with UNIFIL, Israel has carried out a new powerful air strike in Beirut. I'd like to recall once again that the root cause of this escalation in the Lebanese-Israel confrontation is the aggression of Washington and West Jerusalem against Iran, which was the tripwire for a broader destruction of the fragile stability in the Middle East. Unfortunately, many members of the Security Council are stubbornly silent about this and continue to try to place all responsibility exclusively on the Lebanese pushback, presenting it as the main culprit for the spike of violence along the Blue Line. At the same time, they stay quiet about the many violations of Israel's regime of the ceasefire over the last year and a half. This one-sided approach by a host of states, including those directly involved in the current vast regional war, clearly is not helping normalize the situation in the region. On the contrary, it is spurring on warring parties to escalate the conflict. As a result, we are seeing a rising civilian death toll and large-scale destruction of civilian infrastructure. In Lebanon alone, since the 2nd of March, as a result of IDF action, almost 1,500 people have died. The number of injured people is nearing 4,000, and more than 1 million Lebanese people have become IDPs. Israel's strikes on medicine facilities in Arab republics has become an everyday occurrence. Against this backdrop, we are hearing louder and louder militaristic rhetoric from Western Jerusalem, including orders from the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to expand the so-called buffer zone in south of Lebanon, illegally under control of the IDF. President, we reaffirm our commitment of our country to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon. We call on the leadership of Israel to refrain from using purely military means to address their legitimate security concerns, to withdraw their army units from occupied territories, and to return to the path of diplomacy. A key benchmark for parties should remain to ensure that to fully honour their obligations under Security Council Resolution 1701 and other decisions of the Council, including those that provide the parameter for the activities of UNIFIL, which continue, despite threats to their security, they are remaining in their positions and paying with their lives to implement the UN mandate bestowed upon them to stabilize the region. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation. For his statement, I give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Señor Presidente.
Mr. President, I thank the Presidency for organising this meeting and Mr. Jean-Pierre LaCroix, Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations, Mr. Khaled Khiari, Assistant Secretary General for Middle East, and Mr. Tom Fletcher, Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. Thank you all for your briefings. President, the official reports and recent information confirm an alarming deterioration of the security and humanitarian situation in Lebanon. In our last statement, my delegation warned that the situation required an urgent international response in order to avoid precisely the situation that we're facing today. Against this backdrop, Colombia reiterates its appeal to all parties to fully respect international law, including the provisions of the United Nations Charter, international humanitarian law, and relevant resolutions of the Security Council, in particular Resolution 1701. There can be no sustainable solution without respecting these frameworks. This is why it's essential to return to the peaceful means of settling disputes and putting an end to the use of force, including the illegal occupation of Lebanese territory by Israel. The humanitarian crisis that Lebanon is experiencing today is not unrelated to the omission and the systemic violation of these principles. My delegation therefore condemns the repeated attacks against civilian infrastructure, health facilities, and the forced displacement resulting from Israeli armed actions, and the land incursions that are contrary to the provisions of Resolution 1701. Colombia launches an appeal to put a halt to all actions that are incompatible with the obligation to protect civilians and to guarantee the required international support, including sufficient and sustainable financing to provide assistance on the ground and to mitigate the impact of the hostilities on the civilian population. My delegation also underscores that accountability must be guaranteed for those responsible, because it is only with justice that we can avoid a fresh outbreak of violence. At the same time, the security of the organization's personnel and the inviolability of its facilities must be guaranteed at all times by all parties. Colombia expresses its condolences to the victims and their families, as well as to the government of Indonesia. To them, to their families, and to all members of the organization, in particular staff serving on the ground, we thank all of them for their service to the cause of peace. Mr. President, Colombia reiterates its solidarity with the Lebanese people. Similarly, we underscore that the respect for sovereignty, political independence, and the territorial integrity of Lebanon are not negotiable. In this context, my delegation welcomes the decisions adopted by the Lebanese government over recent weeks with a view to containing the effects of the escalation of hostilities and to move to recover the legitimate monopoly over arms. At the same time, we launch an appeal to all parties to halt all actions that may block these efforts. Mr. President, the current situation in Lebanon is not happening in a vacuum. Addressing the humanitarian crisis without clarity over the causes that fuel it, or seeking an end to confrontations without taking into account the broader regional dynamics, is not only an incomplete approach, but is also an insufficient response given the grave time we are currently in. Colombia considers that the Council will hardly be able to fully carry out its responsibilities as long as it continues relying on partial and selective approaches to address a crisis of this magnitude. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Colombia for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
السيد الرئيس.
Mr. President, I would like to take this opportunity as we convene the Council's final meeting for the month of March to express our thanks to the Presidency of the United States of America for its efficient and capable management of the Council's work throughout this month. We also thank France for its swift response to the dangerous escalations in southern Lebanon and for requesting the convening of this meeting. We further appreciate the comprehensive briefings presented by Mr. Jean-Pierre LaCroix, USG for Peace Operations, Mr. Khaled, Assistant Secretary General for the Middle East and Asia, and USG Tom Fletcher, Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. We thank them for their comprehensive briefings. We also welcome the participation of all permanent representatives in today's session. Mr. President, the Kingdom of Bahrain strongly condemns the attack targeting United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, which resulted in the killing of 3 of its personnel and the injury of 5 others. Bahrain affirms that targeting peacekeepers constitutes a blatant violation of international law and of Security Council's resolutions. The Kingdom extends its sincere condolences and sympathy to the families of the victims, to the government of Indonesia, and to the United Nations, and wishes the injured speedy recovery. The Kingdom also stresses that ensuring the safety and security of peacekeepers is a responsibility shared by all parties and underscores the necessity of respecting UNIFIL's mandate and enabling the mission to carry out its duties without hindrance. We emphasize the importance of keeping Lebanon away and neutral from regional conflicts and reject any attempts to drag Lebanon into such confrontations. The Kingdom reaffirms its steadfast position in support of the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Lebanon and highlights the need to empower the Lebanese state institutions to exercise full authority over all its territory in a manner that safeguards national security and stability and fulfills the aspirations of the Lebanese people. In this context, we value the steps recently taken by the Lebanese government, which demonstrate a clear seriousness in working to ensure state monopoly of weapons and to ensure weapons stay in the hands of the legitimate institutions, including measures related to disarming the so-called Hezbollah. The Kingdom also expresses its appreciation for the Lebanese government's explicit stance in rejecting and condemning the attacks carried by Hezbollah, which threaten Lebanon's stability and represent a dangerous escalation in the region, as well as for the Lebanese government efforts to impose an immediate ban on all security and military activities associated with the group. We also welcome the announcement by the Lebanese leadership of its intention to engage in internationally mediated negotiations with Israel to reach an immediate ceasefire. This reflects a sense of national responsibility and a desire to spare Lebanon further escalation. Mr. President, in this context, the Kingdom of Bahrain condemns any escalation that could widen the scope of confrontations and turn them into a full-scale regional conflict. We also condemn any violations of the ceasefire agreement. We condemn the expansionist-oriented Israeli statements and warns of the dangers of any ground incursions that may undermine Lebanese sovereignty, threaten its security and safety, cause civilian casualties, exacerbate humanitarian conditions, and trigger large-scale displacement. All these developments carry grave implications for regional stability. The Kingdom stresses the need for full adherence to the international law and international humanitarian law, particularly in terms of the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure, ensuring the unimpeded delivery of humanitarian assistance. Mr. President, Bahrain affirms that supporting the Lebanese armed forces and the internal security forces, strengthening their capabilities remains a cornerstone for preserving Lebanon's stability and safeguarding its sovereignty and security. This requires intensified international efforts to provide the necessary support, enabling these institutions to perform their duties effectively, especially in southern Lebanon. In conclusion, the Kingdom of Bahrain reaffirms that preserving Lebanon's unity, stability, and sovereignty is a collective responsibility. It calls on all parties to abide by the relevant international resolutions, foremost among them Security Council Resolution 1701 of 2006, and to work urgently toward consolidating the ceasefire and preventing further escalation. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Bahrain for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. I thank USG LaCroix, ASG Khiari, and USG Fletcher for briefing us today. The United Kingdom strongly condemns the recent attacks on UNIFIL, including those which caused the deaths of 3 Indonesian peacekeepers and injured Polish peacekeepers. Our thoughts are with the families of the deceased and with the injured. Such attacks are unacceptable. We urge all parties to ensure the safety and security of UNIFIL personnel and premises in accordance with international law. I thank all peacekeepers serving in Lebanon for their dedication, bravery, and professionalism. Many of us here had the opportunity to meet them during our visit to Lebanon in December. President, the UK is clear in its condemnation of Hezbollah's decision to join Iran's attacks against Israel. Hezbollah's attacks on Israel, including civilian communities south of the Blue Line, must cease immediately. The actions of this proscribed terrorist group, at the instigation of the Iranian regime, are once again drawing the people of Lebanon into a conflict they do not want and which is not in their interests. I commend the Lebanese government's decision to ban all Hezbollah military activity and initiate a plan to bring all weapons under state control. We will continue to support the Lebanese armed forces as they undertake this task, as Lebanon's sole legitimate defender. However, Israel's decision to expand its ground operations further into Lebanon undermines this work and threatens Lebanon's sovereignty. Strikes on Lebanese armed forces positions are also deeply concerning. President, as we've heard here, the conflict is causing a deepening crisis with dire consequences for civilians. The humanitarian toll is staggering. More than 1 million people have been forced from their homes, with women and children facing the greatest risks. Among the displaced are over 12,000 pregnant women, many struggling to access essential health care. At least 121 children have been killed, and countless others are enduring the trauma of violence, loss, and upheaval. Attacks impacting healthcare facilities have intensified, with more than 50 health workers killed to date. This is unacceptable. All parties to the conflict must uphold international humanitarian law. Civilians and critical infrastructure must be protected and humanitarian access enabled. The United Kingdom has provided $12 million in support of the government of Lebanon's efforts to reach vulnerable communities. We stand with those working tirelessly to protect civilians and deliver life-saving assistance. And finally, President, we support the urgent need for direct negotiations between the governments of Israel and Lebanon. This is the only path towards lasting peace and security for people both sides of the Blue Line. Both Israel and Lebanon want to see an end to Hezbollah's ability to threaten the region. Further expansion of this conflict will only repeat the cycle of violence across the Blue Line and drag the region further into crisis. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for his statement. I will now give a statement in my capacity as a representative of the United States. And colleagues, I too thank you. I thank our briefers for their thorough updates, and I thank France for convening this urgent meeting. We too mourn the loss of 3 Indonesian peacekeepers on March 29th and 30th, and we do extend our heartfelt condolences to their families, to their loved ones. And colleagues, we honor their sacrifice in the service of international peace and security. We also wish a full and swift recovery to the other UNIFIL peacekeepers who were injured. Colleagues, one of those that we mourn is Private First Class Ramadan. Just 28 years old, Private Ramadan was still at the dawn of his career. His company was due to return very soon to Indonesia, where the young husband and father would be reunited with his 2-year-old daughter, Shania. His last communication with his family was a simple red heart, an emoji. I've worked personally with many junior soldiers like him, and I think the Indonesian press got it right from everything that I've read about him when they called him a, quote, young warrior in training. But unfortunately, this young warrior died while keeping the peace. He was a young father, a young soldier, thousands of miles from home, who trusted that this council would deploy him where he would be most effective. Colleagues, peacekeepers endure exceptional dangers to prevent conflict and protect civilians. Their safety and security must be respected by all parties at all times. And that is why I ask this council and the watching world to pause and to reserve judgment until the United Nations can fully investigate and fully assess the circumstances of these tragic incidences, even as we share in the shock and sorrow of this loss. I say again, the media, the world watching, and this council should pause and allow the United Nations to fully investigate and assess the circumstances of these incidences. Again, on a personal note, as a soldier, now turned diplomat, that has commanded coalition troops, we all know the dangers that exist when we accept these missions. But in contrast here, the peacekeepers that this body sends to conflict zones are often surprised by the very real perils that they face. Countries like Indonesia send their sons and daughters to support the UN mission of peace. They're not sending them to fight a war. This council owes them condolences, but we also owe them a wise approach to peacekeeping that recognizes that terrorists have no respect for this council. Terrorists have no respect for the norms of international law. Colleagues, we all recognize that the suffering in this region is immense and has gone on for far too long. Parents, children, and grandparents, whether Israeli or Lebanese, whether civilians or UN peacekeepers, they should not face the daily dangers caused by Iranian-backed terrorists who have long afflicted both Israel and Lebanon. The people in this region deserve a different future, one defined by security and economic opportunity and normal life, not by rockets, tunnels, and the constant threat of escalation and retaliation. We must support the government of Lebanon and the Lebanese armed forces as they exercise sovereignty, and we've heard a lot of talk about sovereignty today, but as they exercise sovereignty, the duly elected government of Lebanon, over all of Lebanon's territory and beat back Hezbollah, a group that hides behind civilians while threatening their neighbors, a terrorist group that has a long history of hiding weapons, fighters, and caches of rockets in schools and hospitals and civilian homes. Hezbollah also has a long history of attacking peacekeepers and of firing on Israeli civilians from proximity of UNIFIL and peacekeeping positions, inviting retaliation for their own propaganda aims. Colleagues, since 1978, over 300 UNIFIL peacekeepers have been killed and this is in this mission, and this is why this council must think very carefully about the effectiveness of this effort. We can help refocus international efforts on supporting Lebanese state institutions, reducing risk to peacekeepers, and pressing Hezbollah and Iran to cease their destabilizing activities. We, the United States, will continue to work with Council members, regional partners, troop contributing countries, and the parties on the ground to reduce tensions, support Lebanon's sovereignty, and make a better future for the Lebanese people. I thank you. I will resume my duties as President of the Council, and under Rule 37, I invite the representative of Lebanon. I give the floor to the representative of Lebanon.
Mr. President, Lebanon firmly and unequivocally condemns the attacks targeting UNIFIL, which threaten the security and safety of its mission and personnel. Lebanon stresses the need for full respect of UNIFIL's mandate by all parties and for ensuring its security and safety, the inviolability of its premises, the freedom of movement, and all measures that facilitate the performance of its duties in accordance with international law and relevant Security Council resolutions. The attacks on peacekeepers are attacks on this Council itself. They undermine its reputation and credibility before the peoples of the world. These barbaric and irresponsible acts must stop, regardless of who is responsible. It is the legal and moral responsibility of this Council to identify and hold accountable those responsible. It is worth noting that this force and the troop contributing countries have embodied the highest values of sacrifice, past and present. Who among us does not recall Israel's deliberate targeting of UNIFIL's headquarters in Qana in 1996, and its threats and demanding that UNIFIL leaves its area of operations in 2024? Today, we meet following the killing of 3 soldiers from the Indonesian battalion and the injury of others, one of whom is of Polish nationality, knowing that this was preceded by attacks on the Ghanaian and Nepalese battalions. Mr. President, on behalf of the government of Lebanon, I extend condolences to Indonesia, its government and its people, and the families of the soldiers. We wish a swift recovery to the injured and commend the sacrifices of the Indonesian battalion and all participating forces in contributing to security and stability in Lebanon. Today, we reaffirm Lebanon's commitment to UNIFIL more than ever. We emphasize the importance of preserving the unity of the contributing forces and ensuring their continued participation. We also reiterate our gratitude to the force commander and all the mission personnel. Mr. President, the price the Lebanese people are paying as a result of this conflict is heavy and exhausting. They, the Lebanese people, did not choose this war. It was imposed upon them. Israel has never respected the cessation of hostilities and has continued its violations of Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity and its deliberate attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. Meanwhile, Hezbollah unilaterally decided to enter into a war at a time when the Lebanese government was open to dialogue that could have led to sustainable political solutions and provided a framework for addressing outstanding issues. Mr. President, the humanitarian catastrophe is escalating amid ongoing Israeli attacks, which to date have killed 1,247 Lebanese and injured 3,680, including children, women, paramedics, relief workers, and journalists, many in direct strikes that constitute a blatant violation of international law, international humanitarian law, and the Geneva Conventions. These attacks have displaced more than 1.2 million Lebanese from their towns and villages in a process of mass forced displacement. Israel continues to flatten towns and villages and to carry out large-scale incursions into Lebanese territory, accompanied by calls for establishing security belts and buffer zones, alongside serious threats to Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity. These actions constitute clear violations of international law, of the UN Charter, and of the jurisprudence of the International Court of Justice. We recall here a letter we sent you yesterday regarding the statements by the Israeli Ministers of Defense and Finance announcing the Israeli army's intention to occupy southern Lebanon up to the Litani River and to consider the river as Israel's new border. We call upon this Council to act immediately and to condemn these statements clearly and explicitly, and to take the necessary measures to compel Israel to halt its incursions and threats to Lebanon's territorial integrity and political independence, to withdraw its forces to internationally recognized borders, and to comply with the UN Charter and relevant international resolutions, including the Resolution 1701 and the cessation of hostilities. Mr. President, in the same vein, we strongly condemn the threats by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard to target American universities in the Middle East, which has forced the American University of Beirut and the Lebanese American University to evacuate their campuses and shift to remote teaching. We call on Iran, which repeatedly calls before this esteemed Council to respect the sovereignty of states and non-interference in their internal affairs. We call on Iran to respect Lebanon's sovereignty and sovereign decisions and to cease interfering in its internal affairs. Mr. President, Lebanon and its people sought to rebuild the state and its institutions and to implement the required reforms. The government had indeed initiated this process, alongside with extending the state's authority across the entire country and restricting weapons to legitimate state institutions. Recognizing that nations cannot live in isolation, the government chose to open up to its regional surroundings based on a principled approach that preserved rights and grounded in the belief that sustainable solutions cannot be achieved through force but through peaceful means. In contrast, Israel has continued to undermine the credibility of the government through its ongoing violations and serious threats of occupation and its disregard for the UN Charter, international law, and international humanitarian law. The question that begs to be asked today is, did Israel achieve security after its occupation of Lebanon in 1978? Can security or stability be achieved through military solutions without negotiations? Modern history, Mr. President, and Israel should have learned this as well, modern history has taught us that lasting security and stability and sustainable peace will not be achieved through prolonged wars, protracted conflicts, or occupation. The time has come to draw lessons from the past once and for all. Only a diplomatic solution can guarantee lasting security and stability and ultimately a just peace. Diplomatic initiatives are already on the table, and the time has come to seize them. Let violence stop now. This is your responsibility and your duty. Every day that passes in this conflict undermines your credibility and the credibility of the United Nations as a whole. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of Lebanon for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I would like to thank you and your team for presiding over the Council during this month. I would also like to thank USG LaCroix and ASG Khiari for the briefing. Mr. President, Israel extends its deepest condolences to the families and loved ones of the United Nations peacekeepers who lost their lives. We honor their service and recognize the risks they take every day in carrying out their mandate. Regarding the attack that took place yesterday, March 30th, we can confirm today that UNIFIL forces were hit by Hezbollah explosive devices in an incident near Bani Hayan. In addition, the shelling of the UNIFIL position near Adshit al-Qasar on the 29th of March, in which UNIFIL peacekeepers were tragically killed, was carried out by Hezbollah. The IDF did not fire in the close vicinity of the position. The situation is complex. It is changing quickly, and it is dangerous. But one thing is very clear. This did not happen in a vacuum. Israel did not choose this conflict. Hezbollah did, when it began firing on our communities, claiming to avenge the death of the Iranian regime's supreme leader. This is taking place in an environment shaped by ongoing Hezbollah attacks against Israel. And you know, it started in the 2nd of March. Hezbollah has carried out coordinated attacks against Israeli civilians acting at the direction of Tehran. More than 5,000 rockets, missiles, and drones have been fired at our people. Many of these attacks have been launched from areas south of the Litani River. You know the consequences. People have to hide, go to shelters. Same communities that had to displace over 18 months are doing it again. These are violations of Resolution 1701 and 1559. Hezbollah is deeply embedded across southern Lebanon. It operates from villages, it launches attacks from civilian areas, it positions itself close to UNIFIL forces. This is not by accident. It's a deliberate strategy. They choose where to put the launchers. Hezbollah embeds weapons, command centers, and launch sites within civilian areas. Let me show you only one example. We have hundreds of examples. This map shows Hezbollah launch sites operating directly next to a UNIFIL position. That's UNIFIL position in the yellow, and the red dots, the launch site. It shows 4 Hezbollah launches toward Israel on the 9th, 10th, and 11th of March, near Hania, right next to UNIFIL position 510. And we have hundreds of examples where they place the launchers. They put UNIFIL in the line of fire, in the middle. This is not a coincidence. Israel is coordinating closely with UNIFIL to reduce risk. Meanwhile, Hezbollah is exploiting their presence. On the 22nd of March, Israel sent a formal letter to UNIFIL warning. The head of the Northern Command sent that letter directly to UNIFIL, warning that the vicinity of the Janbat area was dangerous. We saw it coming, unfortunately. And we made clear that Hezbollah was deliberately operating near UN positions and placing them in the direct line of fire. We notified UNIFIL so they would be aware of this risk and take precautions. And let me quote directly what we wrote. Hezbollah is exploiting the presence of the United Nations positions in a manner that endangers UNIFIL personnel. We asked for temporary repositioning, not to escalate, but to protect. Israel has maintained continuous contact with UNIFIL, with UN headquarters, and with troop contributing countries. We have urged forces to remain in protected bases and take shelter because we are trying to reduce risk. Mr. President, as I stressed earlier, we regret any incident in which UN personnel are harmed, but we cannot ignore the bigger picture. Hezbollah continues to violate UN Security Resolution 1701 and 1559. It acts as a proxy of Iran. Iran continues to fund, arm, and direct Hezbollah. We also need to be honest about the role of the Lebanese government. There have been statements, even today, important ones, but it's not enough. Action. Lebanon committed to disarm Hezbollah south of the Litani River. It committed to deploy its own forces in that area. It has done neither. And I listened carefully also to my colleague from France. You mentioned Iran, but when it comes to Israel, you condemn, you demand action. But when Iran openly defies Lebanon's sovereign decision to expel the Iranian ambassador All the responses are very measured, very diplomatic, very polite. When it comes to Israel, you don't, think about the diplomacy. So I ask, how come you took a decision to expel the ambassador last week? To expel the Iranian ambassador. The deadline has passed. As we speak, he is still in Beirut. The guest is no longer acting like a guest. He's acting like he owns the house. Can you imagine that you will get a request from a hosting country? You were all serving in many countries. You will be asked to move out. And you will tell the host country, no, I'm not leaving. I have different orders from my capital, from Tehran, and I'm staying now. How can it happen? At the same time, Hezbollah ministers remain part of the government, and attacks continue to be launched from areas the Lebanese army says it controls, including south of the Litani River. The gap between words and reality is a problem. Lebanon has not taken sufficient action to address Hezbollah's military presence. Lebanon needs to take real action. Until that happens, no one is safe. No one. Not in northern Israel, not in Lebanon, not in UNIFIL bases. We are paying a heavy price. Last night, 4 Israeli soldiers fell in southern Lebanon. We remember them, we honor them. Israel will not accept attacks against its citizens, and we will take the necessary measures to defend them in accordance with the international law. Let me be clear. We have no desire, and I'm telling to my colleague from Lebanon, we have no desire to remain or operate in Lebanon. Our goal is to protect our communities and to push the threat away from our border. Mr. President, this is what happens when a terrorist group turns an entire region into a battlefield. When rockets are launched from villages, when weapons are hidden among civilians, when international forces are placed in the middle of it all. So let me be clear. If Hezbollah continues, the danger continues. If Hezbollah remains armed, the threat remains. Calls for de-escalation that ignore what is happening on the ground, the rockets, the attacks, the ongoing threat, will not solve this. We call on this Council to act. First, unequivocally condemn Hezbollah for its grave violations and designate it for what it is, a terrorist organization. Second, demand that the Lebanese authorities fulfill their obligations, disarm Hezbollah, and ensure full compliance with UN security resolutions. And third, address Iran's role as a threat to international peace and security and hold it accountable for the continued transfer of weapons and funding to Hezbollah. When others fail, Israel act. We will do whatever is necessary to protect our people. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Israel for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Indonesia.
Madam President, thank you for convening this urgent meeting. With France, Indonesia requested this meeting as a testament of Indonesia's long-standing commitment and continued contribution to peacekeeping operations since 1957. I also thank the briefers, USG LaCroix, ISG Khiari, and USG Fletcher. I should also like to thank you, Madam President, for giving me the floor to express the sense of grief, anger, and frustration of over 285 million people of Indonesia. I am sure that this sense of grief, anger, and frustration is widely shared by the people of the world. I am heartened by the pouring of expression of condolences, support, and solidarity from the members of this Council and the wider international community. Let me begin by honoring the memory of the fallen soldiers of peace by calling their names in this august chamber. Zulmi Aditya Iskandar, Major, Infantry, 33 years young. Muhammad Nur Ikhwan, First Sergeant, 25 years young. Fahrizal Ramadan, Corporal, 27 years young. Corporal Fahrizal lost his life serving his duty in our post in Ashid al-Quzair. Major Zulmi and First Sergeant Muhammad lost their lives in the attack to their convoy, providing logistical supports in Bani Hayyan. We cannot accept these killings of peacekeepers. This is a grave loss to Indonesia. This is also a grave loss to all of us, to the United Nations, to this Council, and to every community that looks to peacekeepers as symbols of hope and peace. Further, the attacks injured 5 other peacekeepers: Captain Sultan Wiryan Maulana, Corporal Riko Pramudia, Corporal Arif Kurniawan, Corporal Bayu Prakoso, Cadet Private Denny Rianto. These peacekeepers fell and wounded while carrying out a mandate entrusted to them by this very Council. Indonesia condemns in the strongest terms these heinous attacks against those peacekeepers serving with the UNIFIL on the 29th and 30th of March 2026. Indonesia urges all relevant actors to ensure the prompt, safe, and dignified repatriation of the remains of the 3 deceased personnel and request the best possible medical treatment and comprehensive care for the 5 injured peacekeepers to ensure their full and swift recovery. Madam President, some detractors have argued that the fallen soldiers were positioned in a zone of active war. But this framing overlooks a fundamental question: who is responsible for creating and sustaining that zone of active hostilities? The current escalation did not arise in vacuum. It stems from repeated incursions by the Israeli military into the territory of Lebanon. Indonesia strongly condemns Israeli attacks in southern Lebanon, which constitute a serious violation against the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon. Indonesia continues to stand in solidarity with the government and the people of Lebanon. As hostilities in southern Lebanon escalates, attacks against UNIFIL peacekeepers have also increased in recent weeks. These repeated attacks are not mere incidents, but deliberate assaults aimed at undermining the UNIFIL and deterring its ability to fulfill the mandate of Resolution 1701. These attacks also represent a direct threat to international peace and security and may constitute war crimes under international law. We therefore demand an immediate, thorough, and transparent investigation. Let me be clear. We demand investigation by the United Nations, not excuses from Israel. We demand the Security Council to keep abreast of the investigation and to immediately follow up the results. We demand that the perpetrators must be held legally accountable. Immunity must not become the standard, and attacks against peacekeepers must not be repeated nor tolerated. We also demand a firm guarantee from all parties involved, including Israel, to uphold their obligations under international law, to immediately cease attacks and aggressive behavior that endanger UN personnel and property, and to refrain from any action that further escalates the hostilities. Madam President, the safety and security of peacekeepers must remain and continue to be our utmost priority. Amid escalating hostilities, the Council and the Secretary General must immediately implement emergency measures to ensure the full protection of UNIFIL personnel and assets. This includes review of security arrangement protocols and activation of contingency and evacuation plans commensurate to the developments on the ground. We must leverage all political and diplomatic means to de-escalate this situation. The Security Council must reaffirm the foundational principles that guarantee the safety and security of UN peacekeepers. It is imperative for the Council and the wider international community to take immediate and decisive action to protect those who protect peace. We make these demands in deep reverence for our fallen peacekeepers, to whom Indonesia pays its highest respect for their ultimate sacrifice in the service of international peace and security. To this end, Indonesia remains committed to contribute to the maintenance of peace and security as our constitutional mandated. Now, we demand the Security Council to act and deliver. Today, the Security Council must speak up with a clear, strong, and unified voice to condemn the attacks against peacekeeping personnel. Today, the Security Council must reaffirm the obligations of all parties to ensure and guarantee the safety and security of peacekeepers. Today, the Security Council must take decisive action to prevent future hostilities and attacks against peacekeepers. No more attacks. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Indonesia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Poland.
Madam President, let me thank you for convening this important meeting upon the request of France and Indonesia. I would also like to thank the briefers for the comprehensive information on the situation on the ground. Madam President, Poland is deeply concerned by the increasing instability in Lebanon, which directly affects the safety of the civilian population as well as the UNIFIL personnel. As the result of recent attacks, 3 Indonesian peacekeepers have lost their lives, while others were injured, including a soldier from the Polish contingent. We extend our deepest condolences to Indonesia and the close ones of the fallen peacekeepers and wish the injured a swift recovery. Poland strongly condemns these incidents. Ensuring safety of peacekeepers must be a top priority for all parties involved. We expect the ongoing investigation to conclusively determine all the circumstances of these tragic developments. Madam President, we wish to point to the increasingly difficult situation of UNIFIL, marked by growing security threats, reduction of the operations capabilities due to the 15% cuts, and the lack of a clear plan for the termination of the mandated activities. These elements create uncertainty regarding UNIFIL's mode of operation in the future. We therefore call for development of clear operational guidelines for the implementation of Resolution 2790, enabling troop-contributing countries to align their planning while ensuring both the continued implementation of the mandate and the safety of soldiers remaining in Lebanon. Madam President, in a broader context, we call on all parties to refrain from any actions that would further escalate the situation and to return to the implementation of the ceasefire agreement, which was negotiated by the United States and France in November 2024, and to ensure the full implementation of the provisions of Resolution 9001. We are deeply concerned about the humanitarian situation of the civilian population. In response, Poland has delivered the first batch of humanitarian aid to Lebanon. Additionally, answering humanitarian appeals, we have made voluntary contributions to international Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. Further aid programs are currently being prepared. Madam President, we call on all parties to urgently return to the ceasefire agreement and to fully respect Security Council Resolution 1701. Poland reaffirms its strong support for the mandate of UNIFIL in the southern Lebanon, and we commend the courage, professionalism, and steadfast commitment of UNIFIL peacekeepers in the fulfillment of their mandate. And I thank you.
I thank the representative of Poland for the statement. And now the representative of France has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, President. I'll be very brief. Following what was said by our colleague from Israel, I won't make a comparison between French's statements and Iran, but simply because it would never cross my mind to compare the nature of France and Israel relations and France and Iran on the other hand. The only thing we would have to say is we want to see a de-escalation. We want to see territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon respected by all, and we would always recall Iran and Hezbollah's responsibility for the start of all of these operations. Thank you.
All right. I thank the representative of France for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. However, before adjourning this meeting, I would like to warmly thank the Secretariat of the Council for all the support they have given us this month. And I thank all the members of the Council for joining us in this bit of history and for lending us your support, and to the variety of voices from this seat, from the First Lady of the United States, to Ambassador Waltz, to myself, and to all the other ambassadors from US-UN. As I gavel the presidency closed, as I speak also on behalf of everyone here at our mission, in wishing the delegation of Bahrain good luck for the month of April, but we know luck favors the prepared, so you're going to do very well. My thanks to everyone from the mission, and have a great day. Thank you, everyone. The meeting is closed.